must unite what has been set asunder.
We are TFR. Truth Frequency Radio.
Welcome to Spirit's Journey, coming to you live on Truth Frequency Radio and simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. Your hosts are Patrick and Catherine Andrews.
Join us each week as we explore a wide range of metaphysical topics such as dreams, astrology, intuitive readings, and life purpose. You'll receive practical guidance so that you can live your most awesome life.
Learn more about what we do at intuitiveschool.com and connect with us on Facebook at Spirit's Journey Radio. Well, welcome back with us. We forgot to tell you, Robin, this is backwards Saturday, so we had a little technical glitch there with our intro. So we're doing things backwards today, everybody.
That was our lovely intro that should have gone first. But anywho, you all know who we are. We're Spirit's Journey. And we're here with Robin Goff, the founder of the Light Center. And so we're talking about that the Light Center is this amazing oasis where people can experience nature, rebalance themselves, attend a fascinating workshop, and just spend a couple hours sitting talking to Robin, who is full of wisdom. So, Robin, I love the story that you told me about how you decided to open the Light Center, because, you know, my big focus in life is, you know, life purpose. How do people find their purpose? And you have such a unique story. I wondered if you can share again how it all came about that you are now the founder of the Light Center.
Well, I actually had a meditation experience where I literally heard the instruction, build the Light Center. And of course, I had no idea what that meant. I mean, this was easily 35 years ago. And it was such a compelling message that I said, yes, of course I'll do that. And then I thought, wonder what that means. So I was living in North Carolina at that time and started talking with people and meeting with people about it and looking for pieces of land that could form a light center. And then we moved. I moved to Kansas City and started all again. And I didn't know anybody in Kansas City, so I would put out notices at health food stores and Unity churches, because I was going to a Unity church at the time. And sure enough, people started coming forward to meet and have these gatherings and talk about how do we form what I was calling it originally at that point was an alternative healing center. And, you know, that in my mind meant it probably would be like a menu of things. Like maybe you'd have a massage therapist and an energy healer and a chiropractor and acupuncture, you know, all those different kinds of things available, which is not exactly what it has ended up to be, but that was the best idea I had at that point of what on earth this might be that I'm building. So I just kept moving ahead and met with this group of people, and we would vision. We'd have these great meditative visioning experiences, and everyone would bring forth their ideas of what this space would be. And it was like, oh, we grow our own food in the country, and we have this idyllic lifestyle and beautiful water features around and plants growing everywhere and animals and so on and so on and so on. So that was great, except then when I found this particular piece of land, it was probably about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes from where most people were living in Kansas City. And so one by one, people would say, oh, well, I have to work at this job, and so I can't move out there. And then the next person would say, well, oh, my child needs to attend this school, and so I can't move way out there. And another couple would say, oh, well, we're going through a divorce, so we can't move out there. So it was like, okay, my guidance is telling me just anchor this in the earth and say, this is where I will be. This is where I am anchoring the light and forming this light center. And then whatever is needed for that will be attracted to it. So I had been teaching a class at Unity Temple on the Plaza, a Unity class. And there was a man who had been attending my class, and he heard my stories about searching for a place in the country to create a space like this. And he knew that I had been searching and having some ups and downs in that whole process. And one day he said to me, you really need to go and look at my grandfather's farm, because it's back on the market again, and it's been through a series of ownership, and now it's not available. It's on the market, so let's go look at it. So I went out there, and the minute I saw it, I said, this is it. I know this is the place. And yet, it was pretty trashed out. They had done a lot of reclaiming land through making their own landfill, which meant there were old appliances and old hot water heaters and trash of all descriptions everywhere. So, especially right near the house. And so for the first year and plus more, we started cleaning up trash and had to clear the space out just to get to the point where we could see how beautiful it was beneath all of this debris. And Catherine, when I cleared this one bank of debris and trash and everything, daylilies popped up and started to bloom all over that hill. They had been there all along, but they'd been suppressed by all this junk on top of them. So I just love that as a metaphor for life and and for taking an old farm and reclaiming it and making it into all that it could be. So we just started working, and there was an old horse barn there, a large old horse barn that by now it's probably 120 years old. And you could see right out through the siding on the walls. It was that rough, but it had an intact roof on it. And if you don't lose the roof, then the rest of the building can stay more or less intact. So my friend, who was an independent contractor, Mark Gossman, took a look at it and fell in love with it. And he said, we can rebuild this building. And being as naive as I was, I said, oh, okay, that sounds like a great idea.
This was before all the fixer-upper TV shows that made it look so easy.
Yeah, exactly. Way before. And it was dirt floor and horse stalls at that point. And there were possums living in there and all kinds of old junk and debris and stuff. So it was like an insane idea to think that we could rehabilitate this old building. But we just jumped in. And at that point in time, there was no zoning in the township where we lived, where we were. And so we did not have to work with building permits and all of that kind of thing. And we just tore in and started rehabbing this old barn. And Mark was really the visionary of the whole project and had really great ideas about how we could make something that was safe and within the parameters of building codes, and yet work within all of the constraints of working with a really, really old building where nothing is straight. There's not a straight line in the whole building.
That's what makes it so beautiful.
So, yeah, it's rustic, and yet it's beautiful at the same time. So.
That's an amazing story. One of the themes that I grasped from, your life purpose story and is trust, because all of a sudden you just got this message, build a light center, and you didn't question it. You just held faith and trust throughout the process. And I think that is such a key for a lot of people is, not trusting those crazy intuitive messages and going with it. And you did it, and you're still thriving today. What is it, 25 years later, or how many years ago was this?
It's 25, yeah.
25, yeah. So that, if anything, a takeaway today, at least for myself, is again, that just trusting what comes through, even if it sounds crazy. Just like when Mark said, oh, we can do the barn. And of course you thought it was crazy, but you went with it, and it's thriving. It's an awesome place.
And it worked, yeah.
Now, I'm really interested.
And I remember.
Go ahead.
I would say one thing, Patrick. I remember vividly during those days following that adage that you only need to be able to see as far as your headlights go. And as you drive, your headlights go a little further, a little further, a little further. So I kept that image in my mind a lot, that I just need to be able to reach out with my foot and feel around for the next step. I don't have to know where the whole path is going or be able to see the whole way unfolding before me. I just look for, okay, now what? What's next? Because I did not know anything about living in the country, much less having a big old building.
I think that's such a big lesson because, so many of us, we have these ideas of what we want to accomplish, but then we have this mistaken idea that we have to know the whole path and everything that we're going to do and all the steps to get there. And we really just need to know the first step, right?
Right.
And then after that, then the next step becomes known and the next step. So I'm interested in sustainability, and I know that means a lot of things to a lot of different people. And sometimes people just think of sustainability as being just energy. We understand you're not fully off the grid, but you do a lot of sustainable activities there on the Light Center. So could you describe some of the things that you do?
Well, we've been working with alternative building methods in every way we could, alternative ways of improving insulation. And we built a very tiny earth bag construction house that's actually a little hut that's my office, and I have a bunk in there for when I stay there. My husband and I have another farm, so I'm not there all the time, but when I'm at the Light Center, I stay in this tiny little space. And earth bag construction was developed in California, and it's taking big old bags like grain bags and filling them with a gravelly kind of mix. And the KU Green Builder kids came down from KU and actually did the physical lifting of these very heavy building blocks that are now like an 80-pound bag, almost like lifting a bag of cement. And they built this up, and then we plastered the inside and the outside. And that little space does really, really well without any air conditioning. I have one tiny little fan in the window, and I've been able to manage through the whole summers without any air conditioning. It breaks down for us in the winter because California winters aren't like ours. And so if I were to do it again, I'd put some kind of layer of insulation around the outside of it because it will absorb the cold much the way a castle wall would. You know how castles can feel real cold inside, which is great in the summer, but not so much in the winter. So we just keep researching and learning about alternative ways of building and creating things. So right now we've been working on fixing up an old outbuilding that we're going to use as our art building. It's called the Creation Station, and I know you two have helped work on that space. And so we're working with what are called eco bricks in a small section of this building as an experiment and a learning experience, where you take 2-liter pop bottles, plastic bottles, and you stuff them full of grocery store baggies and Target bags and Walmart bags, et cetera, et cetera. And you can take like a whole giant trash bag full of baggies and stuff it into one 2-liter bottle. And you stuff it and stuff it and stuff it until it gets so hard that it feels like a brick. No popping left as you squeeze it and get all the air out of it. And that becomes your building brick. So you can actually build a structure with it. And in developing countries, they are building little houses and things with those, where people use whatever building materials they can come across. We're using it instead for an alternative for insulation. So they do have an insulating property, and I think it's 2.5 per inch approximately. And so we're going to mortar them in. And as we mortar them in, we'll use papercrete, which is newspapers that you soak in water and get them down to paper pulp, drain the water out, and then you mix that with Portland cement. And that also has insulating properties. So we'll mortar the eco brick bottles in with this papercrete, and the whole thing will then end up being an alternative form of insulation. Then our plan is to do a final coat over top of that and mosaic the whole thing. So it's a really fun and great learning experience. I've been talking with the KU Green Builders again about getting involved with helping with that. And we've had lots of school children involved with helping create the eco bricks for us. The Baldwin City Junior High art class has been really, really helpful in creating those. So it's been a fun, great learning project for everybody.
Well, and everybody's talking about, the problem with plastic. So this is like a fabulous way to take care of all the plastic bags so they don't end up in the ocean or, other places.
Yeah, you bet. Yesterday I attended the climate strike that was happening in downtown Lawrence. And it was so impressive to see our young people stepping up the way they are and really seeking positive change for our culture and for our climate. And it struck me as I was taking in all of that yesterday, how I feel as if I've been on a climate strike for 30 years.
Yeah, people had to catch up with you. You're a visionary, Robin.
I left my first marriage and my lifestyle in Mission Hills. I felt that I just could not fit myself into that environment and that lifestyle. I call it the American dream lifestyle, And so I broke away from all of that with this deep sense of purpose, like you're talking about, Catherine, that I know there's something else for me to learn and demonstrate and create with other people that feels much more in harmony with Mother Earth. And so when I lived in Kansas City, I was working as a hospice chaplain, but I was doing a lot of teaching about holistic healing. And with a background in both nursing and chaplaincy, it kind of gave me permission to work halfway in between the two. So I wasn't doing either one in its traditional form, but I was creating my own place in between where you look at how is it that I can heal my inner experience, my sense of connectedness to myself and connectedness to others who matter to me, and then connection to spirit, which permeates all of that. And so I kind of developed my own language, my own way of talking about spiritual healing and what does that mean and how do you get there. And I was able, at the hospices that I worked with, I was actually able to see 100% of our patients who were hospice patients. Typically, chaplains see 50% of the patients at the most because people opt out and they don't want to have a chaplain visit. But because I was working in this different way, a different vein, the nurses would really, really urge their clients to see me, to let her come. She's not an ordinary chaplain. Just let her come. And then it would give me this chance to talk with them in this whole realm of, well, what's really going on here? And what's going on inside of you? And what are your fears? And where is it that you think you're going as you go through this journey of dying? And it was just fabulously interesting and probably one of the most potent learning experiences I've ever had in my life. So Kansas City Hospice, which is a wonderful, really large hospice, created a contract position for me called Stress Management Consultant. So I was making skilled nursing visits, bringing this kind of in-between work to people. So when a patient was having all the morphine and all the Xanax in the world, and they were still climbing the walls and agitated, the nurses would call me to come in and work with that person. And I would go in and I would work with energy healing and meditation and visualization and relaxation techniques, and that person would relax. Sometimes frequently first visit within an hour, that person was totally transformed. It's because it kind of begins to work with what's really truly going on here, things that don't fit in the realm of medication. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm all in favor of pain management with people who are dying of cancer. Absolutely, it's essential. But then there's a whole nother piece that is that inner spiritual work that is absolutely mandatory. And everybody who goes through that path in some way finds themselves face to face with that. So it's just fabulously interesting, and I've been very, very blessed to walk that walk. And since I've been then out in nature, I have explored even more of how to work with energy healing on the earth. And so looking at the earth as a living organism and full of all kinds of living organisms, we can apply the same things that we learn through energy healing and energy healing theory.
Yeah, let's definitely take that up on the second half of the show, Robin, because we are coming up to a break.
So this is the bottom of the hour. We're going to be going on a short break. During the break, please visit the Spirits Journey page on tfrlive.com. This is Spirits Journey on Truth Frequency Radio, being simulcast on Wellness Talk Radio. See you on the other side.
Real people, real radio.
Initiating the truth frequency.
This is Truth Frequency Radio.
Radio, simulcast on Wellness Talk Radio, among others. We are here today with Robin Goff and Light Center and some of the changes in consciousness. So welcome back, Robin.
So, Robin, one of the things I wanted to talk about, you mentioned before the break about the American dream, that you had the house in a nice area and all that, and you left it. You said, I have a different purpose. And so I do notice a lot of people are kind of seeing the emptiness of what used to be considered the American dream. And I wondered, what do you think the shift is going on with that? And what is the new dream that's emerging for a lot of people?
You know, it's interesting, Catherine. I've been doing a lot of thinking about this recently. I think that the way that we've been living in mainstream America is not sustainable. I think that we have been using up way, way, way more than our share of the resources of the planet. And people are getting that. They're starting to realize that. They're starting to feel uncomfortable about that. And there can be a lot of fear about the future and what's going to happen to my lifestyle and where do we go from here and how are we going to survive in this world ahead. I've been talking a lot with a wonderful man named Sharif Abdullah, who wrote a book called Creating a World That Works for All, that is basically about that whole concept of there were originally people living on the planet in tremendous balance with all of nature, and then we developed in different ways of providing our own food and growing our own food and so on and so forth. All of these changes then started to break down the balance on the planet. And then there's been a whole wave of people, maybe starting with the hippies, maybe even before that, you know, people saying, wait a minute, the status quo doesn't work. This is not sustainable. We need new ways. We want better ways. And so we've been talking about this for easily 30 years and yet continue to consume, nature's resources and grow our food in ways that perhaps are damaging to the soil, and losing a lot of our great topsoil from this Midwest basin here. And so we're at a point in time where we can't not see it. It change is so rapid and so dramatic that more and more of us are waking up to the fact that maybe the American dream has become more of a nightmare and needs to be addressed. So Sharif Abdullah has been conducting some conversations with quite a number of us that he calls the Butterfly Project, and uses this amazing metaphor. So if you think about a caterpillar that's climbing around in your garden and devouring all the leaves off of your plant, it can leave a whole plant just stark with not a green leaf on it. And yet, at some point, that butterfly stops chewing on everything and says, I'm going to build a cocoon. It's time for change. And so within that cocoon, there are literally cells that are called the imaginal cells. And those cells hold the DNA blueprint for the butterfly that's going to be formed. But at first, powering these imaginal cells. But when the imaginal cells start to clump together and get stronger, the caterpillar dissolves and the butterfly body begins to form. And I see that as where we are right now in our culture, that more and more people are coming together in little groups and little organizations, in marches and action groups, forming grassroots, person to person, saying, this is what we want our world to be like. This is how we want our lifestyle to change. So that there begins to be more dialogue and more language around that, from which then action can happen, that we really move from a place of protest and angst into a place of proactivity where there's hope, and that gives us lots and lots of energy to move ahead. So Sharif's goal and dream is to form what he's calling imaginal cafes. So we then all are the imaginal cells, and we hold the blueprint for what we can create in this world in all realms: education, the economy, governance, how we grow food, on and on and on, how we're going to even have water, for heaven's sake, to drink. So the imaginal cafes then would be times for people to come together and dialogue and create ideas about projects that they could join together and utilize. And many people already have great ideas that are working, great approaches for doing things differently that are expanding and growing. And if we just make those things bigger, then we will begin to see success in moving into a healthier world, a more in balance world than what we perhaps have grown up with throughout our lifetimes.
That is the most beautiful idea. I love it. And I've heard a lot of different stories, people using the process of how the caterpillar turns into a butterfly to relate to the spiritual process, because there's that point when the caterpillar's in the cocoon and it's just a big mess. Nothing's formed. And then, eventually it's kind of like the spiritual process. Sometimes we feel like we're completely falling apart in the process. And then this, we're, newborn self after we, figure out, and build this spiritual foundation. So I think that's awesome. And I think the important thing about that is that instead of looking at what we don't want, it's imagining and recognizing we already have the blueprint and focusing on what we do want, which of course, that's going to be the powerful way to visualize because the mind doesn't understand the negatives. So if we have to always be protesting against something, we're actually feeding energy to that as opposed to focusing on what we do want. And I think, a lot of times, and I have felt this way too, you look at these big multinational corporations, that are polluting the earth and, all these other, the big government, and you feel powerless, like, oh, what can I do? But I think what's shifting is what you said, Robin, is that there's these little grassroots groups forming all around, and they may not have the money backing like these big multinational corporations, but what they do have is something even more powerful, which is the passion and the vision and the desire for something different. And I think that will definitely outwin all the billions of dollars that these big corporations have.
Yeah, I agree with you entirely. And when I said I've been on a climate strike for all these years, that's a big part of it, Catherine. I left my hospice chaplaincy job, which was my paying job, while it was, in fact, at the bottom of the pay scale in our society. Nonetheless, I had a paycheck, and I got so busy creating the Light Center that I left that job, and I have been there for 25 years without being paid. So our center is an all-volunteer center, and that sounds like impossible. Like, how can that be? How can that work? And yet it does. I feel like I've always been provided for. I've always had everything I need. And when money is starting to get short or resources are getting short, something happens, something comes forward and brings all that we need. It's been absolutely mind-boggling to watch that happen. And so I like to think that the mighty dollar does not have to be your bottom line. For me, the bottom line is love. And bringing into this world the most powerful force that exists in this universe, which is unconditional love, is much more important to me than getting, quote, rich with dollars. So that's been the way we've been functioning. And we work under the umbrella of Worldwide Unity Ministries, and their teaching has always been very metaphysical and teaches that the power of our thoughts is creative and co-creative. So that, as you were talking about, when we hold a clear intention and a clear vision, that is able then to come into form through the power of our thoughts. So, for many, many, many years now, I've been a student of energy healing. And somewhere along the line, I encountered an amazing teacher named Helen Yamada, who's in Asheville, North Carolina. And she was the most gifted person in terms of clairvoyance and clairaudience that I had ever experienced. And she took my very science-based mind. I mean, I was trained at Duke University in nursing, and that's as science-based as you can get. And gradually, I started opening my mind to more. There's more. Oh, there's more. And this whole concept of energy and energy as a healing tool was totally foreign to me, totally new. And I just started opening and playing with it and learning about it, and found it to be the most powerful healing tool that I had ever experienced, bar none. And I think everything has energy at its base, even a medication, for heaven's sake, or a plant medicine. And so learning how we can use that force, and, I think that Star Wars had it exactly right, that force to create what we want in our world, to create how we want our bodies to be, to create how we want our world to be around us, is an amazingly powerful process that every single person can participate in and utilize at their own level of understanding. And so I don't dictate that you need to understand spirit or spiritual healing the way I understand it. It is a very, very subtle and yet very powerful force that when we invite it into our lives and into our world can create change beyond anything else we've ever seen. So in recent years, I've even opened my mind to, okay, there's forces in nature. Call it nature spirits or fairies or devas or elves. Call them, these forces, angels. There's so many different ways people have talked about this. Many people have talked about extraterrestrial visitors who've come in ships. And, they're drawn on cave walls all over the world from ancient times. And so there's so much in the unseen world that we don't understand, and we may never fully understand, but we can open our minds and our hearts to it. And I know for me, when I invite in all of those helpers and all of my ancestors who are on the other side, when I invite all those helpers in, amazing, amazing things happen. Things beyond anything I ever dared to ask start to happen in rapid ways around me. So I try to make it a practice daily, to open to all the help the unseen world has to offer me and bring it in. Sometimes I ask specifically for things that I'm working with, and sometimes I just say, use me, show me how I can assist this garden, show me how I can work with these people, whatever it is that's on my plate for the day. And so the words come, the ideas come, the resources come, and it'll knock you right off your feet. Sometimes it's just so powerfully amazing. So that's kind of what I mean when I talk about working with energy healing on the planet. I carry it into my garden. If there's something going on with a plant that I don't know what the plant needs, I just hold my hands there. I open up to this flow, this force field of love, and say, okay, nature, whatever is needed here, I'm just here to assist. Show me what I can do. But you take it. You assist this plant. And the more I do that, the more things are starting to come into an amazing balance called integrated pest management. And we're by no means there yet, but it is possible. I know you love The Biggest Little Farm movie, Kathy.
Oh, yeah.
So
it was so inspiring.
Want to pitch for that, too. It's just an unbelievable system out there that can shift this earth right back into balance as soon as we stop messing around with it, with chemicals and modifying genes and so on and so forth. When we allow nature to begin to come back into balance, all of these forces, the insect world, the plant world, the animal kingdom, all of it can begin to shift in ways that are more harmonious with the environment. It's really an amazing thing to observe. I'll give you one tiny example. Last year, I had tomato hornworms on my tomato plants, and if you've ever seen those, they're big. They're like as big as a man's finger, and they can devour your whole plant and just leave it decimated. So one day I went in to check for tomato hornworms, and here was one with these little white dots all over its back. And so I went and I looked that up on the internet, and those are, in fact, the seeds for the wasp that is the predator to kill off the tomato hornworm. So if I leave that tomato hornworm there with all these little white egg sacs on its back, then the right predator will come to keep that population in balance so that my tomatoes can live. So it's like, okay, hands off. You guys take it. You've got something going on here that's way over my head, way beyond anything that I as a human could ever do.
Well, and I think the key that you did and what they definitely talked about in the movie, The Biggest Little Farm, is they sat back and they observed. And I think so many people are just so quick to like grab the quickest can of insecticide. Oh, got to kill this, instead of just taking a moment, whether it's going to Google on the computer or sitting in meditation or whatever. That's one of the big things I took away from that film. And what you're saying is when something happens, our first instinct, a lot of people say, oh, got to kill it, got to get rid of it. Instead of saying, oh, there could be a purpose. Let's see if nature can handle it. I think that's huge.
Yeah. And honoring that there is a purpose for all forms of life, even if we don't like them.
And the other thing is that, especially in this country and other what we call developed countries around the world, there's always this push for more. So we want to get more yield out of each acre of land, and all of that is to drive up the profits and be able to make more money selling the food and all of those things. So that's where things really get out of balance, is because people start to really push those boundaries of, it pushes things out of balance trying to get higher yields. So you were talking about that your Light Center is run by volunteers. So what does that look like, and how can people get in touch with you if they'd like to be part of your project?
Well, our website is lightcenter.info, and we're also on Facebook under Light Center. We totally welcome volunteers. We have people come in all the time. There's people out there right now. And we can do sometimes work exchange with people, food exchange. Like you come and work in my garden this afternoon and you take home a big bunch of food with you. We have an overabundance of apples right this minute, and we've had a gazillion tomatoes. So we're happy to work with people in any way that works for them, especially people who are yearning to get out of the city or the suburbs and have time to immerse their feet into the soil of nature. So we have a variety of kinds of lodging available out there. We're on Hip Camp, which is a really neat link up like Airbnb, so that people can just come out and camp or rent a space very inexpensively for an overnight stay and just enjoy the sight and the sounds of nature and visit all our little animals. We have a couple of really adorable small goats now who just arrived with us, and chickens and guinea hens and lots of interesting things growing all over the place. So we welcome people to come out and get involved.
So I want to repeat that website because everybody's used to .com. It is lightcenter.info, I-N-F-O. So just keep that in mind when you are looking up her project. Now, how can people get a hold of any kind of information on the Imaginal Cafes? Because that's something that's up and coming.
We'll have to get that on our website. It's something that is in formation right now. There are so many people feeling this felt urge to do something. What can I do? Like going on the climate march is one thing, but then you go home and it's same old. And so coming together to create more concrete ways that we can respond as individuals and as groups of people. I think that the time is here now, and our kids are yelling at us loud and clear, saying, what about my future, people?
And it's interesting
that will create a better world. What?
It's interesting you mentioned the kids because, Patrick and I, we work a lot in the school system, and, we see ADD rampant. And I've actually heard the new term, instead of attention deficit disorder, they're calling it nature deficit disorder. That one of the big problems is kids are not out in nature like they used to be. And I was actually reading in the study that kids who were hooked on electronics, they're trying to get them off them. And they said the thing that worked the best was getting these kids out in nature.
Yeah. Awesome. And our kids are not inclined that way, some of them now. They're so much more comfortable in the technology world. That's become their whole focus, their whole view. And there's a lot of fear around ticks, and there's fear around mosquitoes and snakes and spiders and so on and so forth. But I find a lot of young people are not that comfortable getting out into nature now. Whereas when my generation were kids, we loved nothing more than spending the day out in the woods and building a fort and climbing the tree and so on and so on. And we never thought about fear. There was no fear of being out in nature. So, yeah, you're right. There is a real deficit disorder there, Catherine. I agree with you. I wanted to follow up your question too, Patrick. I think if people want to start exploring this idea of imaginal cafes, I'd refer them to Sharif Abdullah. go on YouTube. He's on there and got lots of great work that he's been doing around creating a world that works for all.
Awesome. Well, I really don't think it's any surprise that kids are growing up afraid of nature, because look at the media. What do they hear about? When they hear about ticks with Lyme disease and Rocky Mountain spotted fever and Ebola and all this
Lyme
stuff, it's
disease,
fear.
West Nile virus with the mosquitoes, right? I never heard about any of that when I was growing up. In fact, when we saw an insect, we would sit there and observe it and couldn't wait to put it in a little container so we could watch it and observe it. We weren't afraid of it.
Yeah, and you know, and just the sensationalism of it too. You know, yes, we need to consider these things and address them, but at the same time, now they consider 60 people coming down with something to be a national epidemic. You know, 60 people out of 330 million people. So it's just, you know, just the sensationalism. They're looking for anything to try to, you know, build up the hype and the fear. You know, it gets people's attention.
Yeah, and like with anything, I've been bitten by hundreds of ticks in the years I've been living out in the woods in the country. And if you took a titer of my blood, maybe it would show I have West Nile or whatever it is, the tick thing, different tick
Lyme
things.
disease,
I don't know. I don't pay attention to that. But yeah, Lyme disease and so forth. And maybe we all have that in our bloodstream. But if your body is strong and your immune system is strong, you can fight that off just like you fight off anything. And so not everybody is going to become ill because they're out in the woods.
Right. I think that's just, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's like it all starts with a healthy immune system. And then if you don't have the healthy immune system, any little thing, you know, could trigger that. But in a way, it could be a good thing because you realize, oh, well, I have a problem with my immune system here that needs to be taken care of, you know. And I remember when you told me that, one of the first times I met you, we were walking through the woods and you said, well, you know, people are so afraid of all these ticks and things, but our body has a way to take care of it. And I think that kids today don't realize that. And I remember the story you had told me once that you had a big black snake in your garden and you just picked it up yourself and put it in a bag. And I thought, oh my gosh, you know, I would have been afraid to do that. So you're a role model for everybody, Robin.
A true pioneer woman, right? Working on that.
Or maybe a little crazy too. I don't know.
No, I think you're bringing some sanity to all of this. And, you know, I really encourage, you know, promoting eating more natural, trying to get things as organic as possible, as unprocessed as possible. And, you know, I really believe there's a fundamental flaw in our Western approach to healthcare that, you know, there's this fighting against. And in fact, somebody was pointing out recently the meaning of allopathic is basically it's like to fight against. And so instead of working with, and that's, I think, a lot of really what we've been talking about today is instead of fighting against nature all the time, which is a losing battle. I mean, my background's in biology, and I know nature will always win no matter what we do because nature is always adapting. So we do really need to learn how to harmonize with nature. Well, Robin, this is the end of our show, unfortunately. It's been a blast having you on. Thank you so much for making time to be on with us today.
And
thank you. I'm so glad you have this program.
So once again, that is lightcenter.info, and you can find out more about Robin and all of her projects. We love having you with us, so please connect with us on Facebook at Spirits Journey Radio. Be sure to like our page. You can study with us or get a reading with us at intuitiveschool.com. This has been Spirits Journey. It's Radio, Patrick Andrews.
And I'm Catherine. Have a great week. We'll catch y'all next Saturday.
Bye for now.